So, Death Note, Light Yagami, Kira, the god-complex teenager with a magical murder diary. Everyone thinks this is peak psychological thriller, peak cat and mouse detective story, but you know what it actually is? It's a 17-year-old kid with a 10 out of 10 in male logic and a 3 out of 10 in female logic, thinking he can rebuild society, and I'm about to explain why. How Silver Atom, from the grand syncretic adventure of Silver Atom, would solve this case. Let's go. Let's cook. Let's do this. Okay. First, let's establish what we're dealing with here. Light Yagami, top of his class, genius IQ, perfect memory, and most importantly, bored. This is crucial. He's bored because he exists in a world where male logic dominates but has no aesthetic framing, no higher purpose, no real challenge. Then he finds the Death Note, and immediately, he goes full Reddit moderator mode. I will become God. I will create a perfect world. I will eliminate all criminals. And that's where everyone gets it wrong. Everyone focuses on the detective story. Can L catch Light? Will Light outsmart the investigation team? But that's surface level. That's baby brain analysis. The real question is, why does Light's ideology fail from a philosophical standpoint? And the answer is simple. He's operating on pure male logic without female logic synthesis. He thinks cause and effect is enough. He thinks if A then B, simple as that. But reality doesn't work like that. Reality operates on the omniscient for potential zenithal framework where aesthetics, perception, and framing are equally important as raw logical causation. Which brings me to my boy Light's fundamental problem. Light Yagami thinks he's read philosophy. He thinks because he's smart he can plan 12 steps ahead, because he can manipulate people, that he understands power. But let me tell you something. This man has clearly never read Plato's Republic. He's never studied the Tao Te Ching. He's definitely never read Seduction, a history from the Enlightenment to the present. How do I know? Because his entire strategy is rigid. It's linear. It's male logic with absolutely zero female logic integration. Let me explain this in Death Note terms. Light sees the world like this. Criminal does bad thing, I write name, criminal dies, world becomes better. Simple causality, right? But here's what he's missing. He's not accounting for perception. He's not accounting for the aesthetic framing of justice. He's not accounting for how people respond to fear versus how they respond to inspiration. You know what Light created? He created fear. People stopped committing crimes not because they understood justice, but because they were terrified. That's not order. That's tyranny with good PR. And tyranny, my friends, always creates resistance. Always. Why? Because it violates the omnicotomy principle. You can't have absolute order without chaos pushing back. You can't have absolute control without rebellion emerging. It's literally built into the fabric of existence. Light thinks he's playing 4D chess, but he's actually playing checkers on a chessboard while everyone else is playing Go, and he doesn't even know what Go is, and he's Japanese. So what's the solution? Well, here's where I come in. The question isn't how does Silver Atom catch Light? That's boring. That's what L is for. The question is, how does Silver Atom solve the Kira problem permanently? And the answer is, Silver Atom doesn't catch him. He transforms him. You see, Light Yagami is a symptom, not the disease. The disease is a justice system that's so broken, so aesthetically bankrupt, so devoid of actual moral framework, that a teenager with a magic notebook can convince himself he's an upgrade. Light isn't wrong that the world needs fixing. He's wrong about how to fix it. He's got the diagnosis right, but the prescription is literally just murder. That's lazy thinking. So here's what Silver Atom would do. Step 1, and stay with me here because this gets wild. Step 1, find Light. And before you ask, how does Silver Atom find Light when L struggled for months? Simple. Silver Atom wouldn't use detective work. He'd use philosophy. Silver Atom would publish a book and call it The Incomplete Justice, Why Kira's Methodology Fails the Moral Aesthetic Test. And in this book, he would systematically dismantle and destroy every single philosophical assumption light is making, expose every logical fallacy, and reveal every aesthetic failure. And light, being someone who obsesses over being intellectually superior, he has to respond. He has to. It's in his nature. He can't let someone else challenge his ideology without engaging. So what happens? Well, Light would either respond publicly, which narrows down his identity, or he comes to Silver Adam privately. Either way, Silver Adam would have him in a conversation. And conversations, my friend, are where Silver Adam thrives. So, Light shows up, maybe through a proxy, maybe through elaborate planning. Doesn't matter. He shows up, and they have a conversation. Now, most people would try to trap him legally, try to get a confession, try to prove he's Kira beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the L approach. That's the male logic fighting male logic. Silver Adam wouldn't do that. He'd do something way more dangerous. He'd attack his worldview. So, Light sits down, probably feeling confident. He's thinking, okay, this philosopher superhero wants to debate me, but I'm a genius. I've debated the world's greatest detective in my head for months. I can handle one super academic. And Silver Adam would let him think that, make him feel comfortable, and then ask him one question. Silver Adam would say, justice is the highest form of moral aesthetic. So why does your methodology create more injustice rather than less? And Light will probably have some prepared answer about necessary sacrifices, about the transition period, about how fear is temporary and order is permanent. All the talking points he's rehearsed in his head for months. But then Silver Adam would hit him with the real question. Why do I exist? Think about it. If Light's methodology was truly superior, if his justice was truly the highest form, why did the universe generate Silver Adam? Why did someone emerge who could not only match him step for step, thought for thought, but outpace him too? Because Light's methodology violated the omnicotomy. He chose force without finesse. He chose male logic without female logic. He created an imbalance, and reality demanded a counterbalance. Silver Adam exists because Light's approach was incomplete. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because Light, the genius that he is, he's going to start seeing it. He's going to start realizing that his entire framework has been built on a false assumption. That power alone isn't enough. That intelligence alone isn't enough. He needs wisdom, and wisdom requires studying all 6 pillars of the acronym SILVER. Strength, intellect, luxury, virtue, endurance, realization. Strength, physical and mental power. Light has this. He's disciplined, he's fit, he's sharp. That checks off. Intellect, knowledge, and strategic thinking. Light thinks he has this mastered, but he's only scratched the surface. He understands male logic, but he's never integrated female logic. He's never studied aesthetic philosophy. He's never contemplated the nature of perception versus reality. He's smart, but he's not wise. Not yet. Luxury, mastery over the material world, understanding how status, refinement, and aesthetic power work. Light has some of this. He's from a good family. He understands social dynamics, but he's never truly understood luxury as a philosophical concept, as a way of being that commands respect without demanding it. Virtue, and here's where Light completely fails. He thinks he's virtuous because he believes in his cause, but virtue isn't about belief. It's about alignment with universal moral aesthetics. It's about upholding the highest principles, even when it's inconvenient. Light needs realization, the ultimate understanding, the awakening to absolute truth, the recognition that you are both infinitely powerful and infinitely small, that you are a co-creator of reality, but also subject to its laws. Light has zero realization. He thinks he's God, but he's never contemplated what being God actually means. He's never asked, why is there something rather than nothing. He's never considered the omniscient for potential zenithal nature of existence. He's never even thought about the one beyond all. Unlike Silver Atom, he's stuck at strength and partial intellect, thinking he's completed the game when he hasn't even finished the tutorial. So here's what Silver Atom would say to Light. He'd say, Light, you have two choices. Choice 1, I expose you. I figured out your identity through philosophical analysis. I know you're Kira. I can prove it. You go to prison, you become a martyr, your ideology lives on in some bastardized form, nothing actually changes, the cycle continues. But we can do choice 2. You admit that your methodology is incomplete. You recognize that you've been operating with insufficient philosophical framework, and you study under me for 6 months. Not as a prisoner, not as a criminal, as a student. For 6 months you read, you contemplate, you master, not just intellect, but virtue, not just strength, but realization. You complete the framework, and then, only then, we revisit the question of justice. And here's the beautiful part. Light can't refuse, because if he refuses, he's admitting that he's not actually interested in the truth. He's admitting that his ideology is ego-driven rather than principle-driven. His own psychology traps him into accepting. And once he accepts, once he starts reading the Republic, the Tao Te Ching, the Art of War, the Tale of Genji, Marcus Aurelius, Kant, Deepak Chopra's Book of Secrets, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, once he starts understanding the full spectrum of human thought, female and male logic, he's going to have a crisis, a massive crisis. Because he's going to realize that everything he thought he understood was incomplete, that his entire worldview was a partial truth, masquerading as absolute truth. Some of you may be thinking, but wouldn't Silver Atom just die if Light writes his name in the Death Note? Excellent question, and let me explain why that wouldn't work. First, the practical answer. Silver Atom would never give him that real name. He would just introduce himself as the Syncretic Grandmaster, or whatever aesthetic title feels right in the moment, something more anonymous. But second, the philosophical answer. Silver Atom is just not a physical being with a single timeline. He's a concept, an idea. You can't kill an idea with a notebook. But even deeper than that, and this is what Light needs to understand, the Death Note itself is a test. It's not a tool for justice. It's a test of whether someone is worthy to think about justice. And Light failed the test the moment he wrote the first name, because true justice doesn't require killing. True justice requires transformation, rehabilitation, elevation. You know what the real power move is? Not writing names in a Death Note. It's making criminals want to become better. It's creating a society where crime becomes aesthetically unappealing, where virtue is literally more attractive than vice. That's what Light never understood. He thought fear was the answer. But fear is incomplete logic. You know what's complete? Making goodness so aesthetically perfect, so philosophically satisfying, so existentially meaningful, that people choose it, not out of fear, but out of genuine desire. That requires mastering both male and female logic. That requires understanding that perception is just as important as reality, that framing matters as much as facts, that aesthetics and truth are not opposites, they're partners. Okay. Let me give you the actual step-by-step of how Silver Atom solves the Kira case. Not the detective story version, the real version. Alright, phase 1, identification. He wouldn't use fingerprints or DNA or surveillance. He would use philosophical profiling. Who would be arrogant enough to think that they could rebuild justice? Who has enough male logic to attempt this, but not enough female logic to do it in an aesthetic way? Answer: a young man, intelligent, bored, probably from a justice-oriented family. Someone who's been told his whole life that he's special, but he hasn't been challenged. Cross-reference that with the pattern of deaths, highly organized, systemic, very male logic driven, and you get a profile. From there, it's just narrowing it down. But honestly, Silver Atom wouldn't even need to identify him specifically. He would just need to draw him out. Which brings us to Phase 2, Philosophical Warfare. Silver Atom would publish that book I mentioned earlier, The Incomplete Justice, Why Kira's Methodology Fails. He wouldn't accuse anyone. He wouldn't call for an arrest. He would simply analyze the philosophy and demonstrate its flaws. And Light, being Light, has to respond. His ego won't let him not respond. Then they'll get to their first conversation. They'll meet, they'll talk, and Silver Atom wouldn't try to trap him. Silver Atom wouldn't try to trick him. He would simply ask questions that force Light to confront the incompleteness of his worldview. Questions like, Light, if your justice is universal, why does it require secrecy? If your methods are correct, why do they create opposition? And if you're a god, why do you still feel so empty? That last one's the killer, because Light does feel empty. The Death Note didn't give him purpose, it gave him a project. And projects end, purpose doesn't. Once Light's worldview starts cracking, and it will crack, because Silver Atom isn't attacking him, he's attacking the logic that Light built himself on. Silver Atom would offer the alternative. 6 months. Complete the pillars of the acronym SILVER. Study under him. Learn male and female logic. What it means to see everything from equal and opposite perspectives. And here's the thing. Light would accept. Because what he actually wants isn't to be God. He wants to be worthy of being a god. And Silver Atom would offer him the path to that worthiness. And this is where it's going to get good. For 6 months, Light would study. Not just throwing books at him, deconstructing his entire mental framework and rebuilding it properly. Light would start with the Republic, because Light needs to understand that this isn't a new question. Plato asked, what is justice? Thousands of years ago. And his answer, that justice is harmony, not domination, is something Light needs to internalize. Then we move to the art of war, because Light thinks he understands strategy, but he's never understood the concept of winning without fighting. The highest form of warfare is preventing the war entirely. Then we hit him with the tale of Genji, to introduce some female logic, show him that power isn't always direct, that influence, aesthetic, and social positioning can be more powerful than any Death Note. Silver Atom would go through all of them. Marcus Aurelius to teach him stoic virtue, the Tao Te Ching to teach him about balance and inaction, Kant's critique of pure reason to show him the limits of logic itself. And then Silver Atom would hit him with the female texts, the Book of Secrets, the Celestine Prophecy, Women Who Run with the Wolves, and Light's brain is going to explode because he's going to realize that half of reality operates on principles he's never even considered. After 6 months, Light isn't even the same person. He won't be. He can't be. Because once he understands the full potential, once he's mastered all logic, you can't go back to simple murder as justice. It becomes aesthetically disgusting. It becomes philosophically repugnant. Light will voluntarily destroy his own Death Note, not because he was forced to, not because he got caught, but because he'll understand that it was never the answer in the first place. And that's how you solve the Kira case. By eliminating the conditions that create criminals, by transforming the would-be god into an actual force for justice. Now I know what some of you may be thinking. You're being naive. Light is a sociopath. He's killed thousands. He can't be reformed. And to that I say, you're thinking in simple logic terms. You're thinking that people are just static, that someone who makes evil choices is fundamentally evil. But that's not how consciousness works. Consciousness is dynamic. It's fluid. Light isn't evil. Light is incomplete. He's operating with insufficient information. Once you give someone complete information, once you show them the full aesthetic framework, they can't help but change. Unless, and this is important, unless they're so committed to their ego and they'd rather die than admit they were wrong. But that's where the feminine logic comes in. See, with men's logic, you'd corner Light and force him to admit defeat. That activates his ego defense mechanisms, he doubles down. But with feminine logic, you don't corner him. You manipulate him into wisdom. You make truth so aesthetically beautiful, so intellectually satisfying, so existentially meaningful that he wants and needs to accept it. You make transformation the cool option. You frame it so that staying as he is would be the embarrassing choice. And Light, being someone who cares deeply about how he's perceived, about his aesthetic presentation, he'll transform not out of fear or guilt, but out of genuine desire to be better. That's the power of synthesis. That's the power of mastering all logic. But what if that doesn't work? What if Light refuses? Then and only then do we move to plan B, which is basically just Silver Atom tells everyone who Light is, Light gets arrested, standard ending, but that's the boring timeline. That's the timeline where nobody learns anything. The interesting timeline, the good timeline, is where Light becomes what he always wanted to be, a true force for justice, but justice done right this time. But let's zoom out for a second, because the Kira case isn't really about Light. It's about what happens when intelligent people encounter power before they encounter wisdom. The Death Note is a metaphor. It represents the system, the tool, the methodology that gives you power over life and death, over people's futures, over society itself. And the question Death Note asks is, what do you do with that power? Most people answer with either men-leaning logic or female-leaning logic exclusively, either pure utilitarian calculation or pure aesthetic manipulation. But the correct answer is synthesis. You use male logic to understand what needs to change, and you use female logic to understand how to make people want that change. You use both together to create transformation that's both effective and beautiful. That's why Silver Atom spent over 60 years contemplating the united theory of everything. This is why the Silver framework exists. Because power without wisdom is tyranny. Wisdom without power is philosophy that never manifests. But power and wisdom, strength and intellect, male logic and female logic, that's how you actually change the world. Not by forcing it, not by manipulating it, but by elevating it. And that's what Light needed to learn. That's what Kira represented. The failure to understand that true justice isn't about punishment. It's about elevation. You don't need to make the world better by eliminating the worst people. You make it better by elevating everyone. By creating systems, cultures, aesthetics that make virtue more attractive than vice. That's the real solution to crime. That's the real answer to injustice, not a death note. So let me paint you the final scene. After 6 months of studying, after Light Yagami has read every book, contemplated every philosophy, struggled with every contradiction, Silver Atom and him would meet one last time. And Silver Atom would say, "Well, what have you learned?" And Light, he'll probably say something like, "Oh, I learned that I was arrogant, that I thought I understood justice, but I only understood a fraction of it, that power alone isn't enough." And Silver Atom, he'd just interrupt and be like, "What did you really learn?" And if Light truly transformed, if he truly understood, he'd say, "I learned that I was afraid." See, that's the real revelation. Light didn't use the Death Note because he was evil. He used it because he was afraid. Afraid of a world that didn't make sense. Afraid of injustice he couldn't control. Afraid of his own insignificance. The Death Note gave him control. It gave him purpose. It gave him a way to matter. But fear-based motivation always leads to tyranny. Always. True justice comes from the heart, the mind, the soul, from love, from genuine care for humanity's elevation, from wanting people to be better, not wanting them to be gone. And once Light understands that, once he truly deeply gets it, he'll look at the Death Note and feel nothing but revulsion, because he'll see it for what it really is, a crutch for someone who wasn't strong enough to change the world without shortcuts. And that's when Silver Atom would say, "So what now, Light? Do you understand the framework? Do you understand the logic? What will you do?" And ideally, Light would say, that he'd spend the rest of his life actually fixing the justice system, not through fear, through transformation, through education, through creating systems that make virtue attractive and vice aesthetically bankrupt. And if Light says that, if he genuinely means it, then we don't need to arrest him. We don't need to punish him, because that light has already died. A new light, a complete light, will have been born. And that's the version of Light Yagami. That's the version that could change the world for real. Not as Kira, as something better, as someone who understands that true power isn't about death, it's about transformation. Now, there's where it gets really interesting from a meta perspective, because Death Note is a story about the exact tension between female and male logic. L, the detective, the world's smartest detective, arguably the world's smartest man in his universe, represents pure male logic. He's all deduction, all evidence, all systemic analysis. He solves problems through rigid logical frameworks. Light represents that same logic, trying to use female logic tools, manipulation, charisma, social engineering, but without actually understanding the underlying structure. Light's faking it. And the story is about watching male logic pretending to be female logic. But what if someone who actually understood both entered the narrative? Someone who mastered the synthesis? That person would flip the entire script, because they wouldn't play the game on L's terms or Light's terms. They create a completely new game that makes the old game irrelevant. Think about it. L's approach, catch Kira, prove guilt, execute justice. Light's approach, be Kira, eliminate criminals, become God. Silver Adam's approach, he would transform Kira, eliminate the conditions that create crime, transcend the entire conflict. See how that third option makes the first two obsolete? That's the power of Silver Adam. You're not choosing between option A or option B. You're recognizing that both options exist within a limited framework, and you're expanding the framework itself. This is why Silver Adam can solve the Kira case, and quickly. Not because he's smarter than L, necessarily. Though let's be real, an unlimited lifespan of immortality really does help. Still, it's because Silver Adam is operating on a completely different paradigm. L is trying to win a chess game. Light is trying to flip the chessboard. Silver Adam would point out that they're not even playing chess, they're playing Go, and both of them don't even know the rules despite being Japanese. Now, I get it. Some of you at this point are going to be thinking, this is all very philosophical. But how does this actually play out in practice? What does the day-to-day look like? So let me break it down. Week 1, Silver Adam, he publishes the book. Social media explodes since he's already a celebrity. People start reading Kira's methodology. Podcasts, interviews. Philosophical argument becomes mainstream. Light is watching all of this, getting increasingly agitated, because they're not attacking him. They're attacking his ideas, and ideas can't fight back with death notes. Week 2, Light makes contact, probably through an anonymous message board or encrypted email, something that maintains his secrecy but allows conversation. He'll challenge Silver Adam's arguments. Light will defend his philosophy, and Silver Adam will respond, not with attacks, but questions. Socratic method. Make him question his own assumptions. Then, week 3 to 4, the conversation will deepen. They're going to now be discussing specific scenarios. What about serial killers? What about terrorists? Do some people deserve death? Walk him through why even extreme cases require a nuanced approach. How execution doesn't solve the systemic issues that created the criminal. How fear-based deterrence has limited effectiveness. And Light Yagami would listen. Silver Adam would find the legitimate concerns buried under Light's God complex. Month 2, Light will propose a face-to-face meeting. He wouldn't be able to help himself. He needs to see Silver Adam for real, to actually believe what he's saying. Probably in a public place. Light's paranoid about being tracked, but Silver Adam would be relaxed. He's trying to teach him, not catch him. Month 3, this is where the transformation would start. Light would start to see the holes in his own logic, not because he's losing the argument, Because Silver Atom's logic is so complete, so comprehensive, that Light's worldview starts to look incomplete by comparison. It's like if you've been playing chess your whole life and someone introduces you to Go. Suddenly, chess would seem limited. Then, month 4 through 6, deep study. Light reading the books, having existential crises, journaling like crazy, his whole identity being deconstructed and rebuilt. This is the hard part. This is where he either commits to transformation or rejects it entirely and tries to kill Silver Atom. If Light chooses violence, they're back to square one. But most people, when genuinely confronted with a superior framework, will choose growth over stagnation. End of month 6. Light emerges different, not broken, refined. He completed strength, intellect, and virtue. He started luxury and endurance. He's not Kira anymore. He's something better. A philosopher activist who understands that real change requires both wisdom and strategy. All types of logic working together. And the Death Note. Light would probably burn it himself in some symbolic gesture. Upload the video to YouTube, say he was Kira, that he was wrong, and explain why. But let's be real. There's a chance Light doesn't transform. A chance his ego is so massive, entrenched, that he'd rather die than admit he was incomplete. In that case, here's what happens. Silver Atom would have already figured out Light's identity through their conversations, through psychological profiling, through the patterns in his arguments that reveal his background, his age, his education level. So when it becomes clear he's not going to transform, when he makes that choice to remain Kira rather than become something better, Silver Atom would just tell L. Simple as that. He would send L an encrypted message. Kira is Light. Here's the evidence. Here's how I know. Good luck. And L, being L, he'll verify it. He'll build a case. He'll catch Light the conventional way. Light goes down. Justice is served. In the boring sense. But here's the thing. Even in that ending, Silver Atom wins. Because Silver Atom published the book. He started the philosophical conversation. He planted the seeds that will eventually transform how society thinks about justice. Light becomes a cautionary tale, but the framework becomes the foundation for actual justice reform. So either way, either through Light's transformation or through his downfall, Silver Atom wins. Because ideas, properly framed, are more powerful than any Death Note. Because wisdom fully realized is unstoppable. Because synthesis, truly mastered, transcends all conflict. That's the real resolution to the Kira case. Not just catching the criminal, not just transforming the criminal, but transforming the entire conversation around crime and justice. Light was never the problem. The Death Note was never the problem. The problem was a society that created the conditions where someone like Light could think he was an upgrade. Fix that, and you fix everything. But the number one reason Silver Atom could solve the Kira case is because power is not about control. Power is about resonance. You see, when Light tried to control the world through fear, through force, through the Death Note, his logic was incomplete. It was unsustainable. Real power is about creating such a compelling aesthetic and undeniable truth and beautiful framework that reality itself wants to align with you. When you're not forcing anything, you're resonating at the frequency of truth, and everything else harmonizes naturally. Light wanted to be God, but he never asked, what does a God do? A God doesn't control every individual action. That's micromanagement, not divinity. We have free will. A God creates the conditions for beauty to emerge, sets the aesthetic framework, establishes the law of moral aesthetics, and then lets it unfold. Light was trying to play God while thinking like a dictator. That's why it didn't work. True divinity, true power, requires letting go of control while maintaining absolute clarity of vision. It requires understanding that you can't force people to be good. You can only make goodness so aesthetically perfect, so philosophically enlightening and meaningful that they choose it freely. And that requires mastering every type of logic, structure and flow. Silver, S-I-L-V-E-R. strength, intellect, luxury, virtue, endurance, and realization. Everything is based on that. Strength to stand firm, intellect to understand deeply, luxury to command presence, virtue to remain pure, endurance to persist indefinitely, realization to see the absolute truth. Light had maybe 1.5 of these, maybe 2 if we're being generous. He thought he was enough, but he wasn't. He needed more to rebuild the world. He couldn't even rebuild himself. But the real tragedy of Death Note is, it's not that Light died, it's not that L died, it's not even that thousands of people died in Kira's crusade. The real tragedy is that Light Yagami, genius IQ, photographic memory, natural leader. Alright, that was a long philosophical rant about how Silver Atom would solve the Kira case. So if you made it this far, congratulations. You've completed approximately 0.001% of the intellectual training required to master the Pillar of Intellect. Only 5,999 more hours of contemplation to go. But seriously, if you enjoyed this completely unhinged breakdown of Death Note through the lens of syncretic philosophy, let me know in the comments. I might do a video on how Silver Atom would solve the trolley problem. We'll see about that in the future. Drop your suggestions below and subscribe if you want more philosophical rants. This has been the author of the Grand Syncretic Adventure of Silver Atom. Stay syncretic, stay silver, and whatever you do, don't take shortcuts to divinity. They never work. See you in the next one.